All right, good morning, guys. Today is Tuesday, March 24th, 2020. This is Mr. Liloia. In this video, I'm going to go over the answers and not just go over, but also explain a lot of the answers that you guys should have gotten or should have tried to work on while working on this activity called Primary Sources in the Revolution. So just a couple quick things before we start up with this. I will be posting another assignment today that will be due Friday. You guys need to meet these due dates. Even though we are doing distance learning, these due dates still need to be met, and there will be academic penalties if you guys do not meet those due dates. So make sure that you're meeting them. And if you're having any issues, you guys have been great about reaching out to me. I've had people in this class, literally every class, reach out to me about questions or concerns or anything like that. And you guys know you can always reach out to me to ask me about any of those questions. So in this video today, I'm going to go over the answer key of this packet, if you want to call it that. I will be posting this same exact key. Let me just scroll real quick. As you can see, my answers are in red. So I will be posting this onto Google Classroom later today, so that not only do you guys have a chance to listen to me talk about this information, but you can also go back and take a look at a lot of the info. All right, so let's start up. So this packet was taking a look at basically different things that led to the causes of the revolution or steps to the revolution. The first one was having you guys taking a look at the Stamp Act. So just like in class, I'm not going to necessarily read all of these sources. But what you have here, in essence, is a copy of the Stamp Act that tells you what things will or will not be taxed under the Stamp Act. So your first question, let me get the, what's this, eraser, pen? Let me get the pen. It's kind of like a highlighter. So with this first question, it says, what makes this document a primary source? Not too good using this pen on my trackpad. But anyway, you guys get the point. So what makes this document a primary source? Well, it's a pretty simple answer, actually, guys. It says it is actual text from the Stamp Act. So let me get my cursor. We scroll up. It pretty much gives you the answer right up here. It says that this is the Stamp Act passed by the British Parliament on March 22nd, 1765, and that it went into effect on November 1st, 1765. All right. Oh, cool. I don't have to erase that. I can just scroll down, unlike the smart board. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question it was asking you was, what was the purpose of the Stamp Act? Well, as you guys should know from notes and from class, it was to tax things, right? But it's asking what kind of things were being taxed, because it wants to know what was the purpose of it. Well, the purpose of it, and you guys probably could have had a bunch of answers for number two. It was a tax to create revenue for the British government after the French and Indian War. It was a tax to help the British government get out of debt. But it's where this answer came from, my answer, to place a tax on printed documents, right up here, where it says, for every sheet of piece of paper on which shall be written or printed. So that's telling us above here that, sorry, let me scroll up. Oh, I thought it was going to stay there. I guess not. Anyway, but that's where I got my answer from, guys. I don't know why the first marker stayed on the sheet, but the second one didn't. Anyway, let's move on to question 3 then, guys. It says, what are at least 4 things that were taxed under the Stamp Act? You could have had a wide range of things for this one. Let me change my marker. You literally could have picked any item from this list below. So you could have picked a copy of a will, a certificate or degree from a university or a college or a seminary, a license, an appointment, a license to be an attorney to practice in court, a deed as a piece of paper that tells you that you own something like a farm or a house, a pamphlet, newspaper, advertisements, calendars. So you literally could have chosen anything, and I listed those right here: court docs, calendars, newspapers, deeds, diplomas, and wills. All right, let's move on to the next primary source. It's from a newspaper called the Pennsylvania Gazette. So it says, from whose perspective is the primary source from? It says retailers of goods, also known, aka, as businessmen. So how do we know that? It's written right in the first sentence here. It says, we, the underwritten retailers of goods, do hereby promise. So underwritten means everything that is written below this. So what it's saying here is that we, the retailers of goods, or we, the businessmen, we, the shop owners. So it's basically announcing themselves, saying that this is written by a shop owner. All right, our second question says, what do the writers in this primary source promise to do? So let me get the eraser out, actually. This pen is really annoying to write with on a laptop. So they actually do say, to get the pen out, it says promise. So it says it's asking you to find out what they promise. So they're saying here, we promise and oblige, which means another way to say promise or to swear ourselves, to not to buy any goods, wares, or merchandise of any person or persons whatsoever that shall be shipped from Great Britain. So what are they saying there? They're essentially saying they're boycotting, right? Because they're saying, we promise not to buy any goods, any wares, housewares, whether it's, forks, knives, plates, cups, merchandising, literally anything that was made by someone from Great Britain. So that's where you would have gotten the answer for number 2. What do the writers of this primary source promise to do? All right, let me scroll down. It says it's still another excerpt from the Pennsylvania Gazette. And it says here, for one, question number 1 for this excerpt, it says, from whose perspective is this primary source from? And the correct answer here, it says, I have written here, is this is from a newspaper. Seems to be from the printers, right? So the perspective, meaning the person who wrote it, are printers, people that print newspapers. So let's see, how was I able to figure that out? Because I just didn't look at this and say, all right, this is written by a printer. No, I took a look at it and I read it. So let's take a look at this. It says, we have certain information from Boston that the printers there intend to continue their papers and risk the penalties, and that if any of them were to stop on account of the Stamp Act, their offices would be in danger from the enraged people. Well, this is something that you kind of had to take an educated guess at. So they're talking about how they have information from printers, and let me highlight that or underline it. Information from Boston that the printers intend to continue their papers, meaning that the printers intend to continue to print their newspapers without paying that Stamp Act. So you can infer from that the writer of this excerpt is also a printer, because they were able to get that very important secret information. I would have also accepted, that's written from the perspective of a patriot or perspective of a newspaper writer or owner. So there are other ways to answer this question that are not different necessarily, but somewhat similar. All right. I guess the trick to making the marker stay is I gotta press on this little mouse pointer cursor thing. All right, guys, number 2, how does this passage show resistance to the Stamp Act? So the answer I have here is that the general public are going to riot if the printers give in to the tax. So this question is asking, how does this passage show that people weren't going to obey the Stamp Act? Let me get a different color, maybe, since we're going to highlight multiple things. That could be useful. So if you go on to read, it says their offices would be in danger from the enraged people. So it's showing here that the resistance is coming from both sides, right? The printers are going to continue to print because they want to disobey the Stamp Act, but also the general public would be so unhappy if they gave up and just gave into the British government that they would actually riot, that they would actually maybe attack the offices of where these newspapers are printed. So these people are going to continue to print, continue to resist, continue to defy, and it tells us there because of not only for their own principles, but also that of the enraged public. All right, guys. Number 3, how does this passage show the colonists' support of the printers? So I've written here the printers themselves would be in danger if they caved and paid the tax. So remember, the question here is how does this passage show that colonists support the printers? Well, the printers are putting themselves in danger, right? Because if they caved in, meaning if they gave in and just decided to pay that tax, well, the colonists wouldn't necessarily support that paper. And that's where this whole idea where I underlined in green, where I said they would, attack the offices or that their offices would be in danger. It shows that the colonists support these printers and the colonists want them to continue to print these papers without raising the price of their newspaper by paying this new tax. All right, guys, let's move on. The Stamp Act Congress. So, we have this bit of a longer excerpt about the Stamp Act Congress. And the first question says, in your own words, what was the purpose of the Stamp Act Congress? And I have written here, colonists were showing their unity by sending a petition to King George to show their opposition to the act. So, all this question is asking you is, what is the point of the Stamp Act Congress? So, in order to gather that, honestly, you guys would have to read this. Let me get this marker out. Would have had to have read, this whole, it's tough drawing with this thing. Top paragraph. It says, the members of this sincerely devoted to His Majesty's person and government esteem it our indispensable duty to make the following declaration of our humble opinion respecting the most essential rights and liberties of the colonists. All right, you know what that first paragraph is saying? All it's saying is this in a very simple way. The colonists are saying that they feel like it's their duty, that it's their right to declare to the British government their opinions about how their rights and liberties are not being met. That's all. So that first paragraph is all it's saying is that we as the colonists feel like it's our duty, our devotion to make our opinion known that to the British government that our rights and liberties as colonists are not being met. So that's the same way as saying the colonists are showing their unity, meaning their togetherness, by sending a petition to King George to show their unhappiness with the act. All right, number 2 says there's 4 complaints. Summarize them. So each of the complaints are here, each of these bullet points. So let me get the pen out. So you have 1 here. You have 2 there. 3. Sorry, guys, kind of hard to write with this pen. And 4. So you have each dash is a complaint. So basically, all you have to do is put these complaints into your own words. So I'll go through each of them on my own. Sorry, guys, just checking the time. Okay. So, number 1, that His Majesty's subjects in these colonies are entitled to all the rights and liberties of his natural-born citizens within the Kingdom of Great Britain. So all that's saying here, let me scroll down, is this. The colonists deserve the same treatment as those in Great Britain. That's all it's saying. Number 2, that it is essential to the freedom of people and the right of Englishmen that no taxes be imposed on them, but with their own consent. It's right here, guys. No taxes should be imposed without their consent, meaning no taxes should be put on someone without asking them. Number 3, that the people of these colonies are not represented in the House of Commons in Great Britain. It's a pretty simple one. Colonists are not represented in Britain, or there's no colonial representation in the House of Commons, similar to our Congress. And then number 4, that the late Act of Parliament entitled an act of granting and applying certain stamp duties and other duties in the British colonies and plantations in America, etc. It's a long name, right? By imposing taxes on the inhabitants of these colonies, and the said act of several acts subvert the rights and liberties of the colonies. This is a this was probably the toughest one. It's a really long-winded way of saying the Stamp Act is taking away the rights and liberties of citizens. And honestly, you guys could have gathered that just from this one line here, where it says subvert means to go around, subvert the rights and liberties of the colonies. All right, let's move on. The Declaratory Act. All right. So, question 1 says, in your opinion, did the colonists win a victory with the repeal of the Stamp Act? So, this is one where this is a question where you guys are going to have a lot of different answers. You see where I wrote down for myself? Answers will vary. This is one where I would have went around the class and asked for like 5 or 6 of your opinions or answers, which I always love to hear from you guys. But in my opinion, not that there's a necessarily a right or wrong answer with this question, but you could have said yes, that this was a victory since the Stamp Act was eventually repealed, but you could have argued no in the same sense too. And that leads us to number 2. What was the purpose of the Declaratory Act? Well, it says the purpose of it was to reinforce who had control over the colonies, which was the British. It was so the British could reinforce to the colonists, hey, we have complete control. So let's take a look at this. How did we figure this out? So take a look at this bottom. Let me get the pen out. Bottom sentence here. And it reads, and be it further declared, meaning let it be known that all resolutions, votes, orders, and proceedings in any of the colonies, so that anything that's going on in the colonies, whereby the power and the authority of Parliament of Great Britain to make laws is denied, are hereby declared to be utterly null and void. So what it's saying here is that anything in the colonies, the power to create resolutions, the power to vote, orders, proceedings, laws, literally anything, guys, is under the control of Great Britain. And that's where you would have got that answer for number 2. Number 3 says, why do you think that Parliament passed the Declaratory Act on the same day it repealed the Stamp Act? Once again, this is one where I would have went around the room asking you guys for your opinion or your voice on this one. So that's why I have answers will vary, but what I've written down is it's to remind the colonists who was in charge. So the colonists got the Stamp Act repealed, but the British government didn't like that. So they wanted to sort of rule a little bit with an iron fist and say, hey, we're the ones in charge here. All right. Let's scroll down. The Townshend Acts. So it says here, question number 1, what was the purpose of the Townshend Acts? So, a lot of these, when they ask these questions, guys, where it says, what is the purpose of this law? What's the purpose of this tax? Let's take a look at the beginning of these primary sources. I'm sorry. So I've written here that to impose more taxes on the colonies and to crack down harder on smugglers. Smugglers are people that bring in, illegal goods. Today we associate the word a lot when we hear like President Trump talk about smugglers. We associate the word with, the opioid crisis, people smuggling in illegal drugs or anything like that. But in this case, it wasn't necessarily drugs these smugglers were sneaking in, but they were sneaking in, merchandising that they don't want to be taxed by the British, paper products, tea, things like that. So anyway, this is where you would have got the answer for question 1. And it says here, whoops, I'm not good with this pen at all. Looks like a cloud, a red cloud or something I drew there. Anyway, um, it says an act for granting certain duties in the British colonies and plantations in America. So, guys, that first sentence says this is a law to create taxes in the British colonies and also the plantations in America. That's like the Caribbean they're talking about there, because the British owned a lot of those islands in the Caribbean where they had plantations. And for more effectually preventing the clandestine running of goods in the colonies and plantations. Clandestine, that's just a fancy word, or a fancy way of saying secret running. That's just another way of saying smuggling. All right. So it says to prevent smuggling. So that's where I got the answer for question 1. It says, what 5 items are taxed by these acts? You guys literally could have chosen anything that, let me get my pen. Anything that is in this paragraph here. So you could have chosen tea, which they have right up here, lead, paper, paint, glass. So they list a whole bunch of things that are going to be taxed based on their weight, whether it's flint, white glass, whether it's lead, whether it's tea, paper. So they give a whole list of things there. We're almost done, guys. Then the Quartering Act. It says, for question number 1, what was the purpose of the Quartering Act? So let's go back up. Remember I told you guys when I asked what is the purpose of something, why was a tax made, why was a law made? Always look in the beginning, usually the first sentence or so. Whoops. Okay. So it says here that the Quartering Act is an act for better providing suitable quarters for officers and soldiers in His Majesty's service in North America. You know what that means, guys? All it means is to provide shelter, provide homes for the British soldiers and officers that are living in North America. So I've written down here to provide better shelter for the soldiers in the event that the barracks were full. So what that means is barracks are like dorms. If you want to think about that, if you guys have older brothers or sisters in college, barracks are like dorms where soldiers live. So the purpose of this act um, was to provide extra housing for the soldiers in the event that those British barracks or dorms were full and the soldiers had nowhere else to go. Question 2 asks, Americans often think this act allowed British soldiers to barge into colonists' homes and demand food. Was this the case? Why or why not? So this is an interesting question because it gives more in this doc, guys. It gives more information about the Quartering Act, which I'm going to highlight. A lot of people have the misnomer that the Quartering Act just means, a soldier just came at 2 a.m., knocked on your door, kicked you out of your bed, ate all your food, stayed for 3 days, and left. No, that wasn't the case, and it wasn't like they just did that because they were having fun to do that. If you read in this law, it says here, and in case there shall not be sufficient room for the officers and soldiers in said places, and you continue to read there, it shall and may be lawful for the government and council of each respective province in His Majesty's dominions in America to authorize and appoint such proper person or persons that they shall think fit to take hire and make fit uninhabitable houses for His Majesty's force of stay. Let me just put a bracket around that. So, no, it wasn't that wasn't that soldiers just, went into people's homes and just used them. Actually, it says that uninhabited houses, right? So if a house was not being lived in by anyone, soldiers had the right to enter that house. Or they went to inns. So, guys, it wasn't like the soldiers were coming in and just, kicking in, a family of 4, kicking in their door, stealing everything and banishing them to the, to the street. That wasn't the case. All right, and then the coercive acts. This is our last one, and then we'll be done for today, guys. Question 1, it says, here are just 2 of the 5 parts of the coercive acts. What did number 1 do to the colonies? So it says, read the coercive acts. So let's take a look at number 1. It says here, whereas dangerous commotions and insurrections have been fomented and raised in the town of Boston, in the province of Massachusetts Bay, New England, to the subversion of His Majesty's government and to utter destruction of the public peace and good uh, in good order of the said town, in which commotions and insurrections, certain valuable cargoes of teas, being the property of the East India Company, and on board certain vessels lying within the bay or harbor of Boston were seized and destroyed. So basically, what they're saying here with this law is that the British government feels like things are out of control in Boston. The citizens are destroying the city, they're saying. They're destroying public peace, and that they're destroying the property of British companies, such as the East India Company, by destroying their tea. And so it goes on to say, in this last sentence here, that from and after June 1st, 1774, it shall not be lawful for any person or persons whatsoever to lade, put off, or taken any goods from the harbor of Boston. So what they're doing here, I'm just going to put a bracket around that, guys. What they're doing, they're saying your punishment for destroying tea from a British company, destroying the public peace, being a nuisance in public, all this stuff, is that we're going to close down the harbor of Boston. That's why I have for the answer for number one, close the Boston harbor. So it's just saying here that, you know what, the British government, or from the perspective of the British government, they're saying, you want to be a nuisance to the public, you want to destroy things, basically you want to act up and be bad, we're going to punish you like a child and we'll close off the harbor. Which today, guys, that would be like President Trump saying, we're closing all roads, all harbors, all trains, all airports, no travel whatsoever. Nothing's going to come in and out. So it's a big deal. So number 2 says, what was outlawed from happening in number 2? And the answer I've written there is that the Massachusetts government could not meet and elect representatives. So I was asking, what did they tell the colonists that they couldn't do? So we have to find something in number 2, the coercive acts, that they said that they can no longer do. When we take a look, let me get my pen out. Once again, at the very end, it says that the said method of annually electing the councillors or assistants of the said province should no longer be suffered to continue. So they're saying here that as another form of punishment for the people that live in the Massachusetts Bay Colony for not following the laws, for just not being cooperative, is that they're not allowing the local colonial governments to meet and elect representatives. That's a really big deal. And last but not least, it says, why do you think the colonists called the coercive acts intolerable? Remember, maybe you had to look up the word intolerable, but to be tolerable means to tolerate someone. So they called it the intolerable acts. They couldn't tolerate it, right? And the simple answer is because block that. Okay, let me scroll down there. Okay, so the simple answer is because all the colonists refused to tolerate these acts. They didn't tolerate them. All right, guys, so I'm going to post this video along with this same answer key in a little bit on Google Classroom, along with a new assignment. So you guys that completed this, you did a great job. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. And that is that. All right, guys, have a nice Tuesday, and hopefully I'll be seeing you guys soon. Bye.